Uma década radical que marcou a transição da era industrial para a era da informação. Uma época de siglas: CD, MTV, VCR, IBM, PC. Um paraíso tecnológico dedicado ao entretenimento e à ergonomia, cortesia do Vale do Silício. Segure-se firme, pois vamos de volta para o futuro. Hoje, em Maravilhas Modernas, tecnologia dos anos 80. Maravilhas Modernas. Foi uma década que balançou o mundo de muitas formas. Uma nave explodiu, abalou a América e acabou com um programa espacial. Uma pandemia foi descoberta e levantou controvérsias sociais.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Um muro foi abaixo, dando fim a 40 anos de Guerra Fria e pela primeira vez o homem do ano foi uma máquina. Essa foi a década de 80 e apesar de alguns tumultos, ela é lembrada como uma época de otimismo e prosperidade.
Money seemed to be pouring out of the sky for a lot of people. And for those who chose not to concentrate on the quote-unquote badness that was going on both in the United States and abroad, it was a fun time.
Yuppies, hackers e garotas de praias criaram uma nova linguagem, uma nova moda e a cultura consumista que surgiu em seguida.
The 80s really kind of came out of that whole concept from the 70s of let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go. It was a decade of attention deficit disorder. It was the amount of product that was out there and people just kept buying and buying and buying.
Em essência, todos esses itens tinham algo em comum. Algo pequeno que cada vez ficava menor. O circuito integrado ou microchip. Ou simplesmente chip.
Anything that human beings interacted with could contain a microprocessor and could become, at least in a tiny way, intelligent. And so in the 80s, that process first became possible and ubiquitous because the chips got so cheap.
Vamos voltar, já que isso se tornou possível naquela década. O que é exatamente um chip? É uma placa de silício com cerca de 1 centímetro cúbico no qual são inseridos transistores microscópicos e fios de conexão. Os transistores agem como chaves que controlam o fluxo da corrente nos fios. Já o silício age como um semicondutor que permite aos transistores processar o código binário computacional, ligado para 1, desligado para 0. O número de transistores no chip determina a potência e o custo.
This is a microchip. It is a Z80 processor, very common in the 1980s. It had maybe 10,000 transistors on it. And to understand how revolutionary that is, you can look at this board. This is what we used before there were microchips. Each one of these little cans is a transistor. What you've done is you've taken these big transistors and you've etched them on a tiny piece of silicon, and essentially you've had machines mass produce thousands and thousands of them for pennies each.
This is a wafer. It's a 300 millimeter 12-inch wafer. And if you look carefully, you can see there are many squares on this wafer. Each one of these is a fully integrated circuit. And the cost of producing this wafer is constant. In 1965, you could only place 10 or 15, 20 components on a single piece of silicon.
Hoje, um único chip pode conter bilhões de transistores e essa taxa de inovação foi prevista pela Lei de Moore. Criada por um dos fundadores da Intel, a lei basicamente afirma que a cada 18 meses a complexidade de um circuito integrado dobra enquanto os custos permanecem constantes. Assim, a performance aumenta, mas o preço não sobe.
The magic of Moore's Law was the fact that it happened on a regularly scheduled basis. So anybody who was trying to innovate, they would look and say, when will my product be able to come to the market? Oh, it'll come in 2.5 years. What will the capabilities of the silicon chip be in 2.5 years? And they would design their innovation to intersect that line rather than only innovating on what was available at the moment.
We're standing outside the Robert B. Noyce headquarters building of Intel Corporation. Intel was founded in 1968 by Robert Noyce, Gordon Moore, and Andrew Grove. They started out building memory products and along the way developed a product called the microprocessor. The microprocessor eventually turned out to be the most important product for Intel.
Os primeiros computadores chegaram ao mercado no final dos anos 70. Em 1981, o chip 8088 da Intel, contendo 29 mil transistores, era o centro de uma inovação que mudaria o modo com que o homem interage com a tecnologia comercial. O PC da IBM.
You had the TRS-80, the Commodore PET, and the Apple II. And they were very popular in middle schools, high schools. They didn't really get into business very much. People had a hard time taking these early computers seriously. It took the IBM PC for people to really look at the computer as something more than a toy. Now it's got those magical three letters, IBM. It must have something to do with business. IBM doesn't do frivolous things.
Os computadores pessoais e os microprocessadores necessários para alimentá-lo geraram uma indústria gigantesca cujo lar já estava estabelecido: o Vale do Silício. Silício é o elemento semicondutor que faz o chip funcionar. E Vale é devido ao Vale de Santa Clara, norte da Califórnia. Inúmeras empresas logo se tornaram organizações tecnológicas e todas cresceram exponencialmente nos anos 80 em uma área de 130 quilômetros quadrados. Hewlett-Packard, 1939. Fairchild, 1957. Intel, 1968. Xerox PARC, 1970. Apple, 1976. Adobe, 1982. Sun Microsystems, 1982, Cisco Systems, 1984. O Vale do Silício possuía uma renda per capita maior que qualquer outra região dos Estados Unidos, e quase metade de seus residentes adultos tinha títulos acadêmicos.
Silicon Valley today is thought of as more than just a geographic area. It's also a state of mind, typified by the lifestyle, the work ethic, the interchange of ideas.
In the 80s, Silicon Valley was just starting into its real boom. Back then, it was this whole robust environment where everybody worked tech, talked tech, and everybody was out to change the world. It was like the gold rush times, but in the 80s instead of in 1849. And everybody from around the world, whether they be from Pakistan or Peoria, they were all coming into Silicon Valley to try to make their mark.
E foi o que muita gente fez, principalmente um jovem chamado Steve Wozniak.
Steve Wozniak is one of my heroes because he really worked in a garage and made an object and then turned that object into a company. And at the time, there was nothing like it. It was a complete computer system. Primitive, yes, but a complete system. And then Steve Wozniak also wrote most of the software for it. So he was a hardware designer, he was a problem solver, he was a software developer, just kind of this incredible genius sort of guy who got the whole Apple Corporation started.
Woz, como era conhecido, e seu sócio Steve Jobs trabalharam noite e dia para tornar um sonho realidade.
The suburban ranch house behind us is the site of the quintessential Valley success story. This is where Apple Computer was founded in 1976 by Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. They started off building Apple I computer boards in Jobs' bedroom, and they moved out to the garage when they received their first production order.
O primeiro pedido foi de um varejista que encomendou 50 computadores Apple e levou os dois Steve à glória profissional.
I was thinking, how do I build the absolute finest, best computer of the day? And Steve was thinking, how can we somehow build a product that will reach the masses and reach people that want to pay money to get access to a computer and to use it? And it was his idea to start a company, and I was kind of like, well, I don't know how to start a company. I just want to, design neat computers and things like that. So we kind of blended our insights, but we did have a goal that we were going to build a product that was so low cost it would improve a lot of people's lives, both at home and at work.
O Apple I evoluiu para o Apple II, que é o mais lembrado por todos. Em seguida veio o Lisa, que é o menos lembrado. foi a primeira tentativa da Apple com uma interface gráfica, ou GUI em inglês.
All the computers before had been command line driven. Let's say you wanted to copy a file from one floppy disk to another floppy disk. You would have to type in commands that specified the name of the floppy disk, which might be something so cryptic as C:, D:, or E:, or F:, and you'd have to type the name of a file, and you couldn't make one typing mistake.
O GUI permitiu ao usuário trabalhar com ícones em vez de memorizar códigos de linhas.
When you're sitting at your desk thinking, how can I design a better computer? You're staring at your desk and there's folders and you got your desktop and there's a garbage can there. I can open and close windows and things talk to each other. And I can move folders around and throw them in the garbage and rename them.
Apesar da aplicação amigável ao usuário, o Lisa nunca deu certo devido ao preço de mercado nada amigável.
It took a megabyte of memory to do that kind of computer, and a megabyte of memory back then just cost $5,000 retail. So our computer sold for something like $10,000, and it wouldn't sell very well. But the price that's affordable has been almost the same since our first Apple II was kind of in this $2,000-ish price range.
Steve Jobs pediu a engenheiros que criassem um computador GUI a um preço acessível, e eles conseguiram.
Here you have, in 1984, the Apple Macintosh. This came out to a lot of fanfare as a different kind of computer, quote, for the rest of us. So while the IBM PC was pitched at the sort of staid, kind of boring businessman, the Mac was for people who wanted to have fun, who were creative, and who weren't computer experts but needed to do work with a computer quickly.
O Mac contava com um mouse, menus que podiam ser arrastados e ícones abertos com um clique. Logo, a IBM copiou as características. E aprender a usar o computador passou de desafiador a execuível.
In the 1980s, if you were using a personal computer, you were a beginner by definition, and people really needed guidance. And the fact that there were magazines like this, and books and other sources of information was really a sign that the revolution was here to stay.
A Apple fez de Woz um multimilionário. Com o dinheiro, ele criou um dos maiores eventos musicais dos anos 80, o Woz Festival.
We put $10 million into building an amphitheater and putting in various needed facilities and plumbing and whatever.
I even tested the porta potties myself. I think the reason it's gone over so well is that we got more porta potties per person than any other event of its type ever.
And we put on the concert, and it would run for 3 days. We had technology tents. This was in the early 80s, and Apple had kicked off this big thing, and now there were other companies building personal computers, and it was becoming a part of our life. And personal computers were just starting to connect to musical instruments, and technology and music kind of go together, and they always do. So I had a technology fair, and companies basically showed off their products and what they could do, and you walked through and got educated.
O Woz Festival prenunciou o casamento de cultura e tecnologia que o microprocessador tornou possível. O chip transformou o modo de fazer negócios e transformou o modo com que as pessoas se divertiam. Quando o assunto era entretenimento, havia inúmeras maneiras tecnológicas de se divertir nos anos 80. Se você teve a sorte de ser criança nos anos 80, deve se lembrar de ter gastado a mesada em um Nirvana virtual chamado Fliperama, cujo limite era somente sua imaginação ou quantas moedas você tinha. O que antes era um lugar para jogar skee-ball e pinball passou a abrigar jogos eletrônicos com os quais você podia sozinho salvar o mundo dos alienígenas apenas pressionando um botão. Mais popular ainda eram personagens de jogos como Donkey Kong e Pac-Man. Segundo Toru Yutani, criador desse último, a inspiração para o personagem veio de uma pizza sem uma fatia. Se você sente falta desses jogos, o Fliperama Vintage Superstore em Glendale, Califórnia, traz de volta sua infância com suas máquinas restauradas.
Came up 500 short.
Most of our customers are people that played these games when they were kids. Some of our customers are collectors. We have some customers that are celebrities. Our most sought-after products are the early 80s video games like Miss Pac-Man, Galaga, Defender, Asteroids, Donkey Kong. If we don't have something, we can find it for you. We completely go through them. We redo the control panels. We put new monitor glass on them, new marquees, new T-molding, repaint the sides. A lot of times we put new side art on them. We can put new monitors in them.
Ginny testa pessoalmente cada jogo antes de enviá-lo ao cliente. Por dentro, o fliperama é uma máquina simples que existe graças ao nosso velho amigo microprocessador.
Power comes through the cord, goes in this transformer, there's some fuses. This is the power supply. Here's the computer board. Here's the memory chips right here. This is the microprocessor. Here's the monitor that displays the image. Then the speakers up here, the control panels in the front, and that's basically what there is in a video game.
A tecnologia do fliperama hipnotizou uma nova geração inteira. E, a exemplo de outros eletrônicos dos anos 80, o tamanho e o preço do jogo foram diminuindo. Aparelhos como o Atari 2600 foram campeões de venda.
There was some interest on the part of many parents in acquiring home games so that their children would be playing at home as opposed to going out into this unknown space of the arcade where the parents would lose control over their children. From the kids' point of view, the games that were conversions of popular arcade games for home consoles tended to be inferior, technically speaking.
Inferior ou não, o videogame fez sucesso. Nolan Bushnell, fundador da Atari, descobriu uma fórmula que funcionou pelo menos por um tempo.
A 2600 contains a very, very simple microprocessor running at maybe 1 megahertz, and that primitive nature allowed it to handle only games that were two-dimensional with just a few colors and a few little objects that were moving on the screen.
Bushnell abriu as portas para o desenvolvimento do jogo e outras companhias produziram cartuchos compatíveis com o 2600. Mas alguns jogos não eram exatamente bons.
As a result of that, Atari, in a way, kind of lost control of that platform. That led in the early 1980s to kind of a collapse of the industry.
Fabricantes seguintes como a Nintendo aprenderam com os erros da Atari. Eles patentearam seus aparelhos e seguiram rigidamente as diretrizes de controle de qualidade. Mas apesar das incríveis inovações em videogames e gráficos, todos ainda sentem saudade dos jogos dos anos 80.
If you poll, say, university students today, more than 50% of them have played with an Atari 2600 still to this day. It's, for some reason, it's maintained its popularity. The Atari 2600 nailed a certain kind of interactive play experience that's possible on a very simple platform. They're really timeless games.
Mas se jogo não é sua praia, você deve se lembrar de algumas inovações televisivas. MTV, CNN e HBO foram alguns dos canais a cabo que ganharam telas do mundo todo. Mas não era possível assistir a tudo. Ou será que era? Pegue seu VCR.
It allowed people to capture television and not have to schedule their lives around their favorite program anymore, because now they could go and throw a tape in the machine, set the timer, record, and go out and do whatever they needed to do.
Apesar do fato de o relógio achar que sempre era meia-noite, o videocassete permitia a gravação do programa na hora para assisti-lo mais tarde.
And it sounds so simple today, but that was a big deal at that time. The phenomenon that resulted was this notion of time shifting. Of course, the other thing that happened, people found the fast forward button, and then they could skip through commercials or parts of the program they weren't interested in.
O videocassete doméstico chegou ao mercado no final dos anos 70, mas a maioria não possuía um até a década de 80. Em 1990, 200 milhões de videocassetes haviam sido vendidos no mundo.
When you were buying one in the early days, you had a big decision, which was, did you want Beta, which was Sony's tape format, or VHS, which was from JVC, and the two formats were completely incompatible.
As diferenças entre os dois levou a uma guerra tecnológica em que apenas um venceria. Essencialmente, os dois aparelhos faziam a mesma coisa, gravavam e rodavam uma fita quando inserida. Para gravar, um videocassete utiliza um cabeçote rotativo que faz o contato com a fita cassete. Conforme a fita passa pelo cabeçote, ele grava o sinal de cada quadro em forma de uma faixa diagonal na fita. Outro cabeçote grava o som e rastreia informações nas bordas da fita. No modo reprodução, o cabeçote rotativo se alinha com a faixa na diagonal utilizando códigos de rastreamento. Conforme gira sobre a faixa, o cabeçote lê as informações da imagem e envia para a televisão. E um outro cabeçote lê o som. A semelhança entre o Betamax e o VHS acaba aí.
Betamax had slightly better quality because it used a larger head to read the tape. And that larger head meant that they could put a little more detail on the tape and get a little better clarity. And that limited the tape's maximum length to 60 minutes when the Betamax decks first came out. VHS was able to fit up to 2 hours on a tape, and because most movies fit in a 2-hour tape, that gave JVC a big advantage in the home rental market.
Foi então que surgiram as videolocadoras e logo se tornou comum alugar um filme e assisti-lo em casa. Ao contrário da Sony, a JVC achou vantajoso licenciar sua tecnologia para outras companhias eletrônicas. A concorrência baixou os preços da VHS e atraiu mais compradores. Mas outras duas razões levaram a VHS a vencer a disputa.
VHS tapes were cheaper and they were more widely accepted in the marketplace. And then there was a force that isn't talked about so much, and that's the fact that most video stores had the front part of the store where you rented Hollywood movies and then a back room where you could rent other material of a pornographic nature. This was the first time that people could actually watch these works of art in their own homes, and that caused an explosion in that particular industry. Since that industry pretty much standardized on VHS, it drove a lot of what was happening in the front part of the video store as well.
Foi o golpe final para a Betamax no mercado de vídeo doméstico. Os anos 80 nos levaram para dentro de casa, mas produtos como o Walkman e o celular nos mostraram até onde a tecnologia pode nos levar. Todos os itens multifuncionais que tanto prezamos hoje tiveram raízes em produtos mais simples e onipresentes dos anos 80. Muitos deles foram criados por companhias japonesas.
In the 80s, you saw the advancement of a whole bunch of devices from Sony, from the Walkman to the CD player, the VCR, the Handycam camcorder. And these devices were paving new ground in terms of innovation, but also design. And then we saw other Japanese-based electronics companies follow Sony. In fact, there are one or two that have sort of referred to Sony as their R&D department.
Mas em nenhum lugar a liderança da Sony foi mais evidente que no ramo da tecnologia musical.
You started with home stereo systems. Those were shrunk down to a boombox, which you would carry on your shoulder and blast to everyone around you. And then came this, the Sony Walkman, which was just a total revolution. You could take your own songs, mix them onto a cassette, load them into a Walkman, stick it in your pocket. The headphones made it sound incredibly good. It was made possible by magnet technology that allowed them to shrink the headphones down to a very small, lightweight package.
Os fones padrões até então pesavam cerca de 400 gramas e cobriam a orelha inteira. A Sony minimizou o aparelho para 40 gramas, substituindo os ímãs de ferrite por ímãs de samário cobalto, mais leves e resistentes. O Walkman envia um sinal elétrico levando a onda sonora que os fones devem reproduzir. Esse sinal cria um campo magnético que atrai ou repele o ímã. O movimento do fio faz o diafragma do fone vibrar, criando as ondas sonoras que você ouve.
It was the first time people could listen to music, any music they wanted to, anywhere, anytime, any place. Frankly, without disturbing anybody else. It seems very simple today, but at the time it was pretty revolutionary, and it really did create a whole movement in terms of lifestyles and behaviors and the way people entertain themselves.
Mas ainda era preciso carregar um monte de fitas que desgastavam ao longo do tempo. Nem o Walkman pôde salvar as malfadadas fitas, pois em 1982, com a ajuda da Philips Electronics, a Sony desenvolveu o moderníssimo Compact Disc.
For decades, we had wax and then vinyl discs, and then we saw the 8-track tape, which was eventually obliterated by the cassette tape. And as we come into the beginning of the 1980s, we're left with two common formats, the cassette tape and the vinyl LP. These were both replaced in the early 1980s by this, the compact disc. The CD is a total revolution, and it's a revolution for two reasons. First of all, the information stored on the CD is stored digitally, so that each time you play the CD, you're going to hear exactly the same sound. And the second reason it's revolutionary is because so much information is stored on the CD compared to a vinyl record.
It was Sony who specified that the CD be able to hold at least 74 minutes of music, because one of our top executives at the time, Noria Oga, was also a conductor and also very interested in classical music and wanted Beethoven's Ninth Symphony to be able to fit on a CD.
Um CD é um disco de 1,2 milímetros de espessura feito de plástico policarbonato. Durante a fabricação, bilhões de marcas ou arranhaduras são feitas em forma espiralada. Ele então recebe uma camada de alumínio super puro a fim de criar uma superfície refletora. Um filme de verniz protege o alumínio e também imprime a estampa do CD. A finalização é feita com o laser semicondutor através da superfície transparente da camada de policarbonato.
If you were able to grab a hold of that little string somehow and peel it off, you'd find that it's a string half a micron thick, but 3 miles long. The laser beam hits the CD, and it's going to find one of two things when it hits that surface. It's either going to find actual mirror, and it's going to reflect back clearly, or it's going to find one of those tiny scratches, and it's going to get diffused when it reflects off. Now, the CD reader is able to tell the difference between actual mirror and scratch, and from that, decide what bits of information have been written onto that CD surface.
Era preciso criar o toca-CD, e o CDP-101 da Sony foi lançado em 1982. A tarefa era convencer o consumidor a comprar seu repertório musical em um novo formato.
But as people heard it or visited with friends or somehow came in touch with CDs and the quality of the music and the amazing fact that it would always have this great quality, it got adopted very quickly. Also, we came out later with the Discman, which was a CD-based version of the Walkman, making CD a medium for portable music enjoyment.
Enquanto muitos usavam a tecnologia para se trancar no seu mundo, outros a adotaram por motivos sociais. O primeiro telefone celular comercial, o Dynatec 800X da Motorola, nos mostrou que era possível sair e se comunicar.
You had the normal telephone, then you had the car phone, and then you had the beginning of the portable cell phone. And we look at this now as totally comical because it's so gigantic. It weighs about 2 pounds, but this, at the time, was possibly the coolest object that a person could own. It cost about $4,000, maybe $1 or $2 per minute to use it.
Mas não tinha fio, e isso era o que interessava. A exemplo dos aparelhos modernos, o tijolo era basicamente um sistema sofisticado de rádio. Quando você disca uma chamada, o telefone envia uma mensagem de rádio para a torre de celular mais próxima. A torre envia a chamada em 2 sequências, uma para a sua voz e outra para a voz do interlocutor. Tal sistema pode transmitir centenas de frequências diferentes e cada torre lida com dezenas de chamadas de uma vez sem que uma interfira na outra. Se um telefone está em movimento, seu sinal é transferido de uma torre para outra com espaço de 3 quilômetros. Os celulares passaram de analógicos para digital. E como vários outros itens, ficaram menores, mais eficazes e mais baratos. Levantando uma das perguntas mais importantes da década. Para quem você vai ligar? A tecnologia de bolso veio para ficar e se espalhou em forma de entretenimento e comunicação. Mas e os aspectos negativos?
The more technology we get, the more it becomes embedded in us, the more we're plugged into our iPods, the more we're on the cell phone. Maybe there's less and less reality in our lives and more mediation of reality through these electronic devices.
Os anos 80 foram digitais, menores e portáteis. Com tantos brinquedos assim, precisamos de um carro para transportá-los e, em 1981, um veículo visionário indicou o portal para o futuro. O DeLorean DMC-12 ainda é um dos carros mais arrojados da história. E olha que ele não é fabricado desde 1983.
This is an exceptional car. It's a very sleek, sexy-looking automobile. It performs well. When you drive it, you get looks from people that you don't get from any other car. I don't know how many times I've had people with cell phones take pictures of this car.
Não houve nenhum outro carro como o DeLorean nos anos 80. A crise do petróleo na década anterior obrigou as montadoras a fabricar carros menores e deixar a questão do estilo de lado. Já o DeLorean era sinônimo de classe. O pai dessa máquina é o famoso designer John DeLorean. O DMC-12 foi criado para o mercado americano, mas por razões financeiras foi produzido na Irlanda do Norte.
The project was funded by a series of small investors, people like Johnny Carson, Sammy Davis Jr., some of John's friends. The big money came from the actual British government to the tune of about $150 million. By building the car in Belfast, Northern Ireland, they had hoped to give people jobs, or unemployment was at the rate of about 30–40%. And with all the sectarian problems in Northern Ireland about that time, people had jobs and they're less likely to be causing trouble in the streets.
Quando o carro chegou ao mercado, todos ficaram maravilhados.
Initial sales were fantastic. Cars were flying off the dealership lots because everybody wanted to be the first on their block. And then it wasn't unusual to see them selling for as much as $10,000 over sticker.
O design espacial do veículo e o status de celebridade virtual foram reforçados pelo seu slogan.
One of the taglines in all the advertising for the DeLorean was "Live the Dream." And to a lot of people, that's what John DeLorean himself was doing. He was a self-made man, married a supermodel, now had his own car company. The whole idea was to live this dream.
Mas o sonho foi curto. A companhia enfrentou problemas financeiros em 1982.
Can't have any conversation about the DeLorean without talking about some of the controversy. The car was underpowered, the car was overpriced, some people didn't like the styling.
A exemplo de seu criador, o DeLorean era elegante por fora, mas ninguém sabia o que havia por dentro.
Cars weren't selling. Interest rates were very high for cars, things like that. And John DeLorean needed money. He was persuaded by one of his neighbors to get involved in a financial deal that he later found out involved the importation and trafficking of cocaine. As most people now know, this was a sting operation. John DeLorean was arrested in October of 1982, finally went to trial in 1984 where he was acquitted on all charges.
I never, ever believed I could be brought into a situation like this.
Of course, when you're arrested, it's on page 1. When you're found not guilty later on, it's on page 6. I still have people to this day say, is John DeLorean still in jail? Not realizing that he never did any time.
2,000 pound, a 2,000 bit 250, 250, 250.
A empresa faliu em 1983.
Sold at 6,250.
Mas o fato de ela ter deixado de existir não significa que você não pode ter um novo. A DeLorean Motor Company em Houston, Texas, monta uma dessas gracinhas com peças novas.
A completely remanufactured car is one that will strip completely to a bare frame and then we'll rebuild using all brand new parts. So essentially you're getting a brand new 25-year-old car.
As peças, motores, transmissões e painéis novos foram comprados quando a produção parou em 1983. Eles também reformam um DeLorean original e obtêm o brilho de outrora.
It's not unusual for a car to come to us in just completely run down, worn out condition and for us to turn it into a car like this one here. We'll refresh the interiors, we'll rebuild drivetrains, we'll do body work, whatever it takes to make the car look as good as it did back in 1981.
E o preço?
A good rule of thumb is it takes $25,000 to have a good running, reliable, daily driver, nice-looking DeLorean. Doesn't matter if you buy one for $15 and you put $10 in it, or you buy one for $25 that's already finished. A good pre-owned car is therefore going to run somewhere in the mid-20s.
Mas se você quer um carro com apenas peças novas, prepare-se para pagar $40 mil. Mesmo desmontado, o DeLorean não é igual aos outros carros.
Here we have one of the DeLorean chassis in its bare form. In the front, very well protected from a front or from a side impact, we have the fuel cell, which because it's so well protected, it really plays into the safety theme that John DeLorean was known for. The chassis is kind of unique in that it's a mild steel coated with epoxy, and that's to keep it from rusting.
Sob o capô encontra-se o motor Peugeot Renault 2.8 de alumínio. Hoje existe um kit de atualização opcional que inclui um novo sistema de escapamento. Conversores catalíticos e silenciadores novos. E quanto à potência?
The Bosch K-Jetronic mechanical fuel injection is what actually meters the flow of fuel from the fuel tank into the combustion chamber through the fuel injectors. A lot of the cars from the late 70s, early 80s all had carburetors. This is one of the earliest cars to use a form of fuel injection.
No topo do chassi fica a estrutura de fibra de vidro sobre a qual os painéis de aço inoxidável são fixados.
Unlike most cars where you have body panels welded to the car, on a DeLorean, all the panels bolt on. So it's real simple to do any kind of panel replacement. You can bolt the panels on and you can bolt the panels off and you're ready to go.
É válido lembrar que você não vai ver muitos carros de aço inoxidável, pois esse metal é 5 vezes mais caro que o aço leve comumente utilizado em carros. Depois de admirar a parte externa, segure a maçaneta e abra a porta.
One of the unique things about the DeLorean is obviously the gull-wing doors, which open upward. They need 14 inches of clearance, which is less than a regular automobile. They're operated by a torsion bar, which sits inside here. It's made out of stainless steel. It's dipped in 350 degrees below zero liquid nitrogen and counter-turned 10 times each way. And then it is taken out, which makes it actually become a spring. Then it is put back in the car. This device here is a rod that allows the door from opening either too fast and gives it support when you close it.
O DeLorean foi um carro único, do conceito e design às controversas circunstâncias nas quais seu criador estava envolvido. John DeLorean faleceu vítima de um derrame em 2005, supostamente enquanto desenhava um carro. Mas seu legado ainda vive. O DeLorean ainda é um dos carros mais vendidos na história americana. Nos anos 80, ser radical era estar na moda, mas também era importante testar o cérebro com jogos intrigantes. A tecnologia dos anos 80 afetou quase todos os modos com que vivíamos, trabalhávamos e nos divertíamos. Mas um produto não precisava ser super avançado para fazer sucesso. O Cubo Mágico, aquele quebra-cabeça de 6 lados, foi lançado em maio de 1980. Em 1982, mais de 100 milhões haviam sido vendidos no mundo todo. O objeto tinha fileiras rotativas e deveria ser girado até que se obtivesse uma única cor. E não valia trapacear colando as figurinhas. Inventado por Erno Robic, escultor húngaro e professor de arquitetura, o cubo contava com cerca de 43 quintilhões de configurações. Mas dizia-se que havia apenas bilhões, pois o conceito de quintilhão é muito difícil de compreender.
Now, what's so interesting about this puzzle is that it's so low tech. And if we can just take a moment to get inside of this, we can see exactly how it was put together.
O cubo possui uma armação central com 6 braços e 6 quadrados afixados. 20 cubos se interligam um ao outro à armação para formar as 6 faces do brinquedo. Isso permite que as fileiras girem independentemente. Apesar do grande número de posições possíveis, alguns algoritmos revelaram 22 movimentos para chegar mais rápido ao padrão de cores iguais. E para os competidores do campeonato do Cubo Mágico é fácil conseguir em 15 segundos. mesmo de olhos vendados. Até hoje já foram registradas 300 imitações do cubo mágico, o que o tornou o brinquedo mais vendido do mundo.
My grandmother had a Rubik's Cube in her house, and I didn't ask her to get it for me. Everyone became fascinated by putting these colored patterns back together. Why? I don't know. But there is an attraction that people have with consistently testing themselves.
Outro brinquedo para testar habilidades era o Genius.
The Simon was like a lot of the games in the 1980s in that it was really primitive, but it was also really addictive. It was an electronic memory game, and it would give you a series of flashing lights and tones, and you needed to be able to repeat the pattern.
Inventado pelo guru dos jogos eletrônicos Ralph Baer, o Genius foi inspirado no jogo Siga o Chefe.
Simon's a computer. Simon has a brain. You either do what Simon says or else go down the drain.
Not only did you have to test your memory, you had to test your speed and agility. Because the farther along in Simon that you went and the higher levels you got, the faster it went.
What was revolutionary about it was that it was one of the very first electronic games that had a microprocessor built into it and that normal people could afford. So that microprocessor had to remember the sequence that had already been displayed and then generate a new random number that would tell it what to display for the next element of the sequence.
Ainda é possível comprar um desses hoje, pois, a exemplo de outros brinquedos, ele foi aperfeiçoado e reduzido de tamanho.
Everything we have in our home, the advances that we've had in our home electronics, all began with devices that became standard in the homes of the 1980s. People don't really realize that the 80s really were as long ago as they were. Simply because the devices that we had then, we're still using now. We're just making them better.
In December of 2005, PC World published an article called The 50 Greatest Gadgets of the Past 50 Years. And it's one of the most popular things we ever did because people are so passionate and nostalgic about the gadgets in their life. And a lot of the ones that they like best are the ones that were really popular in the 1980s, such as the Simon, which was 38 on our list, one of the first popular electronic games, as well as Motorola's original Dynatac cell phone, which was number 35 on the list. And the number one item on the entire list was Sony's original Walkman, just because it's the device that started the personal music revolution.
Os aparelhos populares nos anos 80 deram início a várias revoluções. E com a continuidade dos avanços tecnológicos, forma-se uma simbiose com a capacidade computacional. Quem sabe no que esses aparelhos vão se transformar? De qualquer forma, será em algo incrível.